Well, if you're just joining, we're just sharing a little bit about ourselves in the chat, but we're going to get started. Want to use all of the time that we have this evening. So welcome and thank you so much. This is our kickoff for this school year's webinar series, Every Educator Counts. And this one specifically is titled Defining the Science of Reading. And just some tips and tools for this evening. We will be using, if you're familiar with us and our webinar style, this might not seem new to you, but if you aren't, we do use an interactive platform called Padlet. If you're familiar with Google Jamboard, it's very similar. It's a good way for us to share our thoughts and keep notes about things that we share throughout. And the coolest thing about it is that if you come back and watch the recording, and or if you weren't able to join us tonight, and you joined us later, the Padlet QR codes and links are going to stay in the presentation so you can see what other folks are talking about all throughout as you log on at any time. We'll also use the chat box throughout. We'll use the Q&A. Erin, my colleague Erin, who I will introduce in a moment, she's going to be leading most of the presentation. I'll be a little bit on the back end, answering as many questions as I can, but we will have a Q&A portion at the end. So if you want to just hold your questions, you can do that as well. And then finally, there is a closed captioning button at the bottom, and closed captioning is available for this webinar if you would like to use it. So we are RIF, and our vision at Reading is Fundamental is to have a nation of lifelong readers. And our mission here, Reading is Fundamental, works to disrupt the alarming U.S. literacy crisis by inspiring the joy of reading in children, a critical element to driving the frequency, motivation, and engagement needed to create skill readers. And we here at RIF believe that if we build that foundation of joy early on, there's many, many more opportunities to follow. And if you didn't notice, I'm going to go back really quick in our intro slide. We are all about joy here, and our entire series is focusing on the science and the joy and how those two play together to make an effective impact. And here's a little bit about our footprint throughout the years. We have served about 188 million children. We are in all 50 states, including DC and US territories. We've distributed about 427 million books since our founding. 27,000 communities are supported, and then we have 1 million volunteers and advocates in our system. And you are here tonight, so you are a part of that. So thank you so much. And my name is Carly O'Brien. I'm the Senior Associate of Professional Development here at RIF. I have been a classroom teacher before this. I taught pre-K, I taught 5th grade, even taught some 7th grade at some point. So have been all around, and I am really excited to dive into tonight's conversations. Erin, who I'm going to throw it over through it to in a moment. She is our Vice President of Literacy Programs and Research, and also one of my greatest friends. So I'm super excited to learn from her tonight, and tossing over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Carly. Carly's super quick in the chat too, so she will answer questions as they come up throughout, but also feel free to put questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover this evening. We will go over the major reading theories. I will break down the difference between quantitative and qualitative research and give you examples of each. I'll talk about what it means to be statistically significant, what is an effect size, and share some helpful resources. And then, of course, we'll have a closing and a Q&A with engagement opportunities throughout. Now, one thing that I want to say importantly is this: I teach an entire semester long class that goes deep into each of these. This is a 1-hour webinar. So this evening, what you're going to get is an overview that will hopefully spark further curiosity that you'll continue to research on your own. I'll also pose questions throughout this webinar. These questions are not intended as judgment statements, but rather invitations for you to be critical. Next. So I'm going to start off with a poem and a story. This is one of my favorite poems, Mother's Chocolate Valentine by Jack Pruletsky. Here we go. I bought a box of chocolate hearts, a present for my mother. They looked so good, I tasted one, and then I tried another. They both were so delicious that I ate another 4, and then another couple, and then a half a dozen more. I couldn't seem to stop myself. I nibbled on and on. Before I knew what happened, all the chocolate hearts were gone. I felt a little guilty. I was stuffed down to my socks. I ate my mother's Valentine. I hope she liked the box. So you will see a QR code there with an invitation to share your favorite poem. You can do that now or throughout the webinar. And I'll explain why I wanted to start this way. So I'm going to take you way back to when I took my first reading instruction course as an undergrad. And my professor started off the class by sharing two poems, one about chocolate, it wasn't this one, and another one about eggs. And she brought for us a snack to go with each poem. So she brought for us a hard-boiled egg and chocolate. It was the oddest snack that I've ever eaten, but I also remember it very fondly because of the connection that I made there. And what she shared with us was that when she was a teacher and a reading specialist, she had a center every year called A Poem for Your Pocket. In this center, she would fold up little pieces of paper and write poems in them for students to take and carry with them, because you never know when you're going to need a poem for your pocket. And also provided little slips of paper that students could write their own poems and contribute to this basket of poems. So that was the first day of class. Throughout the semester, I learned all of the very technical skills of teaching reading. I learned all the letter sounds and letter correspondence and the sounds that they made. In fact, our professor required us to come to her office hours individually so she could hear us saying the sounds and make sure we were pronouncing them correctly. She also had us write the letters on a whiteboard so she could make sure that we were forming the letters correctly, because we were going to be modeling this for students. So all throughout, I was learning the technical skills of teaching reading while at the same time having the joy of reading. And that's what this series, Science Plus Joy Equals Impact, is all about. It's about the technical skills of teaching reading with the joy component. So do you want to share, Carly, if anyone's added any poems?
Absolutely.
And you can add at any time, even if you're watching the recording, please add a poem.
Yes. So there is a QR code up there. We're going to come back to this at the end, so feel free to keep it open and keep them coming as they come to you. So far we have, I'll show you really quick. So far we have one on turning 10.
Cool.
I'm really excited to actually like go back on this Padlet and read all of these poems that you all are recommending. So feel free to keep that open and populate it throughout, but we're going to keep on rolling through.
Very good. Okay, so here are the, oh, I see, unable to do the QR code. We can also send a link in the chat. Thank you for letting us know. So we're going to go over the major theories, reading theories. There are more theories than this, of course, but tonight we're only going to cover cognitive, psycholinguistic, and sociocultural. So you might be wondering, why is it important to know reading theories? Because these are theories and models of reading that you are drawing information from. It's the way researchers design and test these models. And then what researchers do in turn shapes the way that educators plan for classroom instruction. So it does connect directly to what you are doing in the classroom. Okay, so first we're going to dive into the cognitive theories, and here are just a few examples of cognitive theories. So we have that reading develops through concrete stages. Linnea Airy has this pre-alphabetic, early alphabetic, late alphabetic, and consolidated alphabetic stages. Probably one that most of you may have heard of or may be familiar with is the simple view of reading. This was developed by Phil Goff and Willem Tunmer. And actually, they developed this to identify the different types of reading disabilities. So you can see down here, you have decoding or word recognition, or I've heard it lovely described as lifting the words off the page, and language comprehension, so your oral language skills. And together that equals reading comprehension. So they designed this to be able to identify students either having a decoding reading disability or a language reading disability, or a mixture of the two. And this has become widely known as the simple view of reading. Now, I do want to give you a reference that in addition to this, because this was developed in 1986, there's been an updated one by Nell Duke and Kelly B. Cartwright called The Active View of Reading. And that was published in 2021 in Reading Research Quarterly. And I will make sure that you have that resource when you get this slide deck. And then another common one that you've probably seen similar brain images to this is just a dual route theory. If you look at the different areas that are colored on the brain there, we're basically saying either you're taking words in at a lexical level, meaning sight, and that's the one at the bottom, that purple one there, or you're taking it in through a non-lexical or like sounding it out, a phoneme, grapheme, chord association. And then of course you have other areas too. That front part of the brain, we actually usually call the Broca's area, which is where that language development occurred. So again, just a few examples of cognitive theories, but some that you may be familiar with. Okay. Next we have psycholinguistic theories. So similar to the cognitive theories, these theories believe that reading is a process. However, it may not evolve through the same concrete stages as the cognitive theories, or it may evolve out of order than that. Reading is a process of creating meaning that involves the reader and the text. So two people really showing up to that reading journey. Readers use background knowledge to understand what they read, and reading involves the brain using three cueing systems to recognize words on the page. Either a phonological system, so again, that's that grapheme, phoneme correspondence, or letter sounds is the easy way of saying that. A syntactic, which you can think of as language structure or grammar, or a semantic, meaning, and that's where your like background knowledge comes in. Now, I'm going to say something and I want to make sure I say it correctly, so I'll repeat it and try to rephrase it. Just because readers use a three cueing system to read, that doesn't mean that we should use a three cueing system to teach reading. Okay, let me rephrase that. We can still observe students reading and say, for example, this student is over relying on their background knowledge to figure out what the words mean. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to use these three areas to teach reading. And finally, we have sociocultural theories. So as it suggests through the name, learning is a social and cultural endeavor. There's a relationship not just between the reader and the text, but the reader, the learner, and the environment, including social and cultural environmental factors. And that literacy learning occurs through social and cultural resources available to the learner, including their beliefs and values. So as you can imagine, and you can see through our book list here, this idea of the learner's environment, that's going to change for each child because we're each coming to school with a different background, with a different environment. Okay, so we have another Padlet, thinking about a literacy program or instructional practice that you have used in the past or are currently using. Which reading theory of the three that we just went through do you think it most aligns with? And what makes you think that? Again, you're trying to connect a reading program or instructional practice to a theory. That doesn't mean you necessarily agree with it or that you like that program. The connection is just between the literacy program or practice and the theory.
And the link is in the chat for you all, and the QR code I'll leave up for a moment.
And thank you for those of you who are sharing poems in the chat too.
Yes, thank you. See lots of folks typing at the top, and pull it on the screen so we could see. I was Googling some of the poems that you all were sharing. There we are.
Yep. Yes, I imagine many of you joining this evening have either state or district policies around science of reading, and that's why you're joining us. You want to learn more.
Are you familiar with that program, Erin, into literature?
I'm not.
Me neither. But I'm intrigued because I see the participant wrote cognitive, but also psycholinguistic. And that's a good point. Like the
Yeah,
curriculums could overlap for sure.
absolutely.
HMH folks must be New York City or Queens because that's what all of my family use.
Yeah, love that text relevant to the children. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, there's ways to do both, right? You can be using a cognitive approach and infuse sociocultural elements to it. Or, yep. Yeah, focusing on the 3 cueing system, I would put that with psycholinguistic too.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I teach an entire semester on this. What you got was 3 slides of a quick snapshot of reading theories. So no one expects you to have mastery over these. Think of it as a launching point for your own continued research and discovery. Okay, so we're going to move on to the reason why everyone's here, defining the science of reading. But first, I wanted to pose for you in the chat, what comes to mind when you think of the word science and or research? So just a word association or a phrase.
Experiments,
Mm,
data.
truth, that's a great one, yeah. Validity. Mhm.
Analysis. Trends. I love that. Lots of similar thoughts.
Mhm. Facts, data, implications, yeah. Oh, focus group, cause and effect, yeah.
Discovery. I love that.
Mhm. Great. Well, please feel free to continue to put those in the chat. We will keep going. So educational research is a social science because it deals with children, people, or adult learners too, but it deals with people. So that means it's a social science. And there's 2 main types of education research. Quantitative, which an easy way to remember that is the word quant, like quantity, or qualitative, like quality. Or you can do mixed methods, a little bit of both. And at Reading is Fundamental, all of our research initiatives are mixed methods. So there's important theoretical and methodological underpinnings to both of these types of research, and I'm going to highlight them for you. Now, I will say that I personally am a qualitative research. I want to share my positionality with you so that you're aware of that as we continue to go along. That being said, anyone who's gone through a research program, such as a doctoral program, is trained in both quantitative and qualitative research, and then you just specialize in one or the other. So we'll start with quantitative. I saw in the chat someone said truth. So a theoretical underpinning of quantitative research is that there's a fixed and measurable reality. Quantitative tries to be objective. So just, again, back to that truth, and proving a hypothesis. I think somebody else said that a hypothesis or testing effects in the chat as well. So you have a hypothesis and you're trying to prove that it's, correct or incorrect or how valid it is. The example that I'll use throughout for this evening is, because it's a hot topic right now, you have a new phonics program and you want to test is this phonics program effective? And you're going to use quantitative means for that. So methodologically, quantitative research requires a large sample size, and you're going to be able to generalize those results, meaning based on your sample size, because it's representative, the results that you get from that, you can apply to all different kinds of contexts. Measurement and tests, I think I saw someone wrote assessment in the chat. Yes, so assessment is a type of test. You can also use surveys and tests that can be measured statistically, but you need numerical data basically. And then the major kinds are randomized and quasi-experimental designs, and I'll talk about each of those too. Qualitative has a different theoretical underpinning. In qualitative theories, reality is dynamic and situated, which sounds like it can be contradictory, but it can be both at the same time, and that's why it's dynamic. The researcher is subjective in this, hence why I started by saying I'm a qualitative researcher. I want to share my positionality with you. I'm acknowledging my subjectivity. And then you're not focused on proving a hypothesis, but rather gaining an understanding. So the example that I'll use for this one throughout is this one. You're trying to understand social experiences. So for example, I want to understand the experiences of 6th grade girls reading Harry Potter in their ELA class. That's something I could use as a qualitative study for. What's different is the sample sizes can be really small. Maybe you only have 12 students in the class that you're doing a qualitative study on. That's fine because the results are not generalizable, but rather transferable, meaning the context is going to be different. So 6th grade girls reading Harry Potter in more of a rural community may have a very different experience than 6th grade girls reading Harry Potter in a more urban or suburban environment. So what you can get from reading qualitative research is not, here's what I'm going to do in my classroom because here's what works, but more of an understanding of what happened in one context to inform what you're going to do in your context. In qualitative research, the researcher is observing and interpreting what's happening because it's in a social environment. This includes participant observations, interviews, focus groups. I did see someone mention focus groups in the chat there too. Questionnaires, which are different than surveys because there's more open-ended responses, and artifact analysis. And the subjects can be selected intentionally. As I just said, my sample here is the 6th grade girls reading Harry Potter. I chose that rather than having it be a randomized sample. So going back to that term science. Traditionally, when we think about science of reading or science in education and research in general, what we're actually talking about is quantitative research, just that left column. And the gold standard of research for quantitative studies is a randomized control trial. And what that means is that by random, and I'm using my phonics example again. So you've developed a new phonics program, and now researchers want to measure, is that program effective? So you get 60 schools, let's say a district of 60 schools that are going to participate in your study. And then you randomize. 30 schools are going to receive this new phonics program, and 30 schools are going to receive what we call business as usual, meaning just whatever curriculum they're already using, nothing's going to change. So we're measuring how the schools that receive the 30 schools that receive the new phonics program are performing compared to the 30 schools that are getting the business as usual. So we will pause for another engagement opportunity. And the question here is, can you think of any challenges with conducting a randomized controlled trial, particularly in schools? Yes, parental consent. So as you can imagine, if we're doing 60 schools, Even though it's randomized and only 30 are getting the program, it's actually all 60, all the children at the 60 schools that would need consent. And then, you know, there are ways to get around consent, but definitely so many variables, yeah. And environmental influences, sociocultural influences, absolutely. I'll share one from my own personal experience. Getting 60 schools to agree to participate in research with only 30 are going to get the program and 30 are not, that's a challenge in itself. Now, it's very common to do like a delayed effect, meaning that in year one, only 30 schools are going to get the phonics program, but after year one, the rest of the schools will receive the program. Yes, expensive, yes.
Expensive, yeah. I was waiting for someone to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then test validity, absolutely. Okay, and that's a good point too. You can go different ways with what measurement you're going to use. Sometimes the researchers may come up with their own instrument that they want to use. So let's say they're measuring this new phonics program, so they're going to administer a phonics assessment. They have to administer it to all 60 schools because we're comparing the two. Another thing you can do is just use the assessment, whatever the state standardized assessment that the students are already going to be taking. So you can use data from that too. Okay, so we went ahead and did our program. We found the results, but now we need to know, were those results statistically significant? This is a big word in research. So let's say in this scenario, the 30 schools that received the new phonics program had an increase of 30 points on the reading assessment, on their reading assessment. That's great. We're so excited. Let's give this phonics program to everyone. But wait, just because there was a difference of 30 points between the schools does not mean that that difference in the scores is statistically significant. And this is where, even though I'm not a quant person per se, I can really nerd out over the statistics. So without getting too deep into it, what the researchers do is they plug this data into a statistics program. SPSS is a very popular one. And the program, without going into too much detail, basically re-randomizes the results over and over again. And what the program is looking for is that the results are not due to random chance. The difference, that 30 points difference between the treatment schools and the control schools has less than, let's say, a 1% chance of being due to chance. Let me say that again. So another way to think about it is that if you ran this experiment over and over again 100 times, only 1% of the time would the results be due to chance, the difference in the performance of the students receiving the new phonics program and the students in the schools that got business as usual. Now comes the real fun part. Okay, so, and this is like really where I'll nerd out. We found out that our study was statistically significant. The schools that got the new phonics program, in fact, did perform better than the schools that did not. But what is the effect size? So if you look at these charts here, we have, and effect sizes can be positive or negative. We're only going to talk about positive effect size. So on these charts, we're going to say that the red line is the schools that had business as usual. The blue line is the schools that had the new phonics program. So in education research and in the National Reading Panel, which we'll talk about, we usually measure effect size. We'll say it's a small effect size if D is a 0.2. We'll say it's a moderate effect size if it's a D equals 0.5, and a large effect size if it's D equals 0.8. This is kind of a rule of thumb, but most researchers do use this. And you can see, if you're looking at those graphs there, what we're really looking at is how much was the mean of the student score to the right or positively different than the students who are getting business as usual. And just to give you some examples, and this is based on the National Reading Panel findings, which again, we'll talk about in a minute. Systematic phonics instruction had an effect size of 0.44. Okay, phonics instruction, 0.44, approaching moderate. Guided oral reading had an effect size on fluency of 0.41, so pretty similar, approaching moderate. Repeated readings on comprehension had a smaller effect size of 0.28. And most of the time we do see small to moderate effect sizes in education research. It's pretty rare, although it does happen to see an effect size of like 1.0 or 0.9 or something. Okay, so now you're wondering, is there a place where I can see all of the education research that's been done and I can look at this for myself? Because again, the goal of this evening is for you to become critical readers of research and to be able to do so confidently. There is a place, it's called What Works Clearinghouse. And to let you know, the inclusion criteria is that is randomized controlled trials, which we just talked about. Quasi-experimental design is similar, but the difference is the schools are sorted by schools that are already getting the program. So let's say your district purchased a new phonics curriculum. We're going to measure groups that already pre-existed. Regression discontinuity design is a newer model that's being frequently used. That's where you basically pick a cut score. So let's say the cut score is based on socioeconomic status, and you're measuring the two groups just slightly below the cut score and just slightly above the cut score, with the understanding that there's probably not that much difference between those two groups of students because they're right on the border of the cut score. So you can use that as a treatment and control. And then single case study, which is also known as within subjects, or another way to think about this is students take a pre-test and a post-test. Basically, students serve as their own control in this kind of design. So we're going to take you to What Works Clearinghouse to show you what it looks like. So here it is. And you will get the link to this when you get the slides for this PowerPoint. And if you go to where there's topic, because we're on the topic of literacy, you can sort by literacy. You can check out all the studies that have been vetted by What Works Clearinghouse about literacy. And then they have tiers of evidence, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, so strong, promising, or moderate. So we're going to show you one. The Leveled Literacy Program, Leveled Literacy Intervention, LLI. Some of you are probably familiar with this. So you can click and you can pull up the full report. It's usually like 2 or 3 pages. It looks like this. And this one was published in 2017, so relatively recent. And I just want to show you you can get all the data on student demographics, the effectiveness, as well as the citation for this study. So you can see here that the authors of this study were Irene Fontes and Gesu Pinnell. And this is a study from 2017 that was published on What Works Clearinghouse. So I'm showing you this because, again, critical readers of research. If you're following the media, or you might hear from your district admin, Fontes and Pinnell don't do anything that's research-based. That's just not true because this is on What Works Clearinghouse, and that's the highest tier for education research. So, when people say to you, is something research or not, you now have the tools to be able to see that yourself. Okay, and now we're going to talk about another popular set of research, and this is the National Reading Panel, a meta-analysis published in 2000. A meta-analysis means that they went through a lot of different studies. For the National Reading Panel, they reviewed studies published between 1966 and 1999, like slightly before this was published. So 1966 to 1999 was the time when this research was happening. They reviewed research from pre-K through 12, all from peer-reviewed journals. And then very similar to What Works Clearinghouse, they were only reviewing studies that were randomized control trials, quasi-experimental, or one group repeated measure, single case. So very similar to What Works Clearinghouse for their inclusion criteria. And so they read a lot of studies. And so, for example, to go based on our phonics one, 75 studies published between 1966 and 1999 met these inclusion criteria. But then based on further inclusion criteria, only 38 of those phonics studies were retained. And just as I shared before, what they found was the overall effect size for phonics instruction, systematic phonics instruction on reading achievement was a 0.44, so approaching a moderate effect size. Now, I will say, as I mentioned, this was pre-K through 12, so that was an average of those effect sizes. There was a larger effect size for K through 2, as you can imagine, than upper grades. But I point that out just so that you're knowledgeable of the difference of effect sizes. And so what's interesting to me, we see these pillars all the time, and we use these at Reading is Fundamental all the time. So we have phonemic or phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And so what I see a lot of times when people are talking about the science of reading, they say something like, based on the new research, and then they name the National Reading Panel. This research was published 24 years ago, and it was done on studies published between 1966 and 1999. So it may be new as in new to you, but it's not new research. And we do recommend, if you want up-to-date research, that you check out high impact journals like Reading Research Quarterly or American Education Research Journal or other high impact journals. Another point that I want to make, again, we use these 5 pillars all the time in my own work. In fact, this webinar series follows pretty closely these pillars. But the National Reading Panel also included in their report teacher preparation, impact on reading, and technology. Give me a minute. So if you're thinking to yourself right now, well, I don't want to base my instruction on technology from studies published between 1966 and 1999. What makes it any difference to base your phonics instruction on that? Again, just a thought. And then we also have a poll for you, so we can do poll time. Yeah, what about writing? Thank you, Cheryl. Do you teach any multilingual learners, or otherwise known as English learners or ELLs?
And I'm really happy I did this right. It's working.
Great.
People are able to answer, which is awesome. Still going up, still going up. I'll give it like a minute. So it's at 36 seconds.
Sounds good.
I'll end it at a minute so that we can all see the results. We have over half of participants. That's awesome. Take another 5 seconds if you haven't already. And we're going to end it. 3, 2, 1. Share results. Can you all see the results on the screen?
If you can't, I can read it to you. So 76% of you do teach multilingual learners, and 24% do not. So a majority of you do. I did that poll to share with you that because of probably when this study was done, the National Reading Panel did not disaggregate the data by English learners. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't English learners in the samples of all of the studies that they reviewed. It just means that they didn't disaggregate the data that way, the way that they reported, for example, effect sizes of phonics instruction on students with specific learning disabilities. So the point being that you can't say with certainty, based on this data, that these things have the same, these components have the same effect size for ELs as, say, you could for students with specific learning disabilities, because they didn't disaggregate the data that way. Certainly, if we were to do this study again, that would probably be a big emphasis, because there's a growing population of multilingual learners in the US. So I say all this not to give you any doubt, because I absolutely follow these 5 pillars in everything that I do, but to just, again, make you critical consumers of research. We also linked the report here. You should definitely check it out. It's very long, but I promise there's executive summaries for each of the components. And to just get you thinking, when people are defining science of reading, what do they actually mean? Okay, and then that kind of sums up quantitative research in a very condensed amount of time. And now I'll just give a little overview of qualitative research. As I mentioned before, with the example of 6th grade girls' experiences reading Harry Potter in their ELA class, the aim of qualitative research is to understand people's lived experiences. Again, because this is a social science, it's about people. So this includes studying culture, expression, beliefs, and values. It's a different kind of data because you usually can't quantify it. So you might do interviews with your participants, focus groups with your participants, observations of, let's say, those girls reading in class and participating in a literature circle. Maybe it's videos of the teacher teaching or the girls discussing. And then artifacts, for example, if they were keeping a reading journal, what were they writing about in it? And so a lot of these things, as you can imagine, can be typed out. For example, you can transcribe an interview or a focus group. You can type out your observations. And so what qualitative researchers do is they analyze it, and Carly found this awesome image here. They take that transcript and they break it up and try to understand it. And there's many different ways to code, so I won't go into all of them, but basically you're looking for patterns or themes that are emerging through the data. Okay, we have good time. I'm sure there's going to be Q&As. I am going to throw Carly for a loop, and I'm going to share a different poem than the one I introed with. It's a longer poem, but I looked at the clock and we have time plus Q&A, so I'm going to share a different poem. But unlike the poem from the beginning, I'm not going to tell you the meaning of this poem or its significance to me. I'm going to let you construct your meaning on your own. So this is called The Little Boy. You might have heard this before, by Helen E. Buckley. Once a little boy went to school. One morning, when the little boy had been in school for a while, his teacher said, "Today we're going to make a picture." Good, thought the little boy. He liked to make pictures. He could make all kinds: lions and tigers, chickens and cows, trains and boats. And he took out his box of crayons and began to draw. But the teacher said, "Wait, it is not time to begin." And she waited until everyone looked ready. "Now," said the teacher, "we are going to make flowers." Good, thought the little boy. He liked to make flowers, and he began to make beautiful ones with pink and orange and blue crayons. But the teacher said, "Wait, and I will show you how." And it was red with a green stem. "There," said the teacher, "now you may begin." The little boy looked at the teachers, then he looked at his own flowers. He liked his flowers better than the teacher's, but he did not say this. He just turned his paper over and made a flower like his teacher's. It was red with a green stem. On another day, when the little boy had opened the door from the outside all by himself, the teacher said, "Today we are going to make something with clay." Good, thought the little boy. Snakes and snowmen, elephants and mice, cars and trucks, and he began to pull and pinch his ball of clay. But the teacher said, "Wait, it's not time to begin." And she waited until everyone looked ready. "Now," said the teacher, "we are going to make a dish." He liked to make dishes, and he began to make some that were all shapes and sizes. But the teacher said, "Wait, and I will show you how." And she showed everyone how to make a deep dish. "There," said the teacher, "now you may begin." The little boy looked at the teacher's dish, then he looked at his own. He liked his dish better than the teacher's, but he did not say this. He just rolled his clay into a big ball again and made a dish like the teacher's. It was a deep dish. And pretty soon the little boy learned to wait and to watch and to make things just like the teacher. And pretty soon he didn't make things of his own anymore. Then it happened that the little boy and his family moved to another house in another city, and the little boy had to go to another school. And the very first day he was there, the teacher said, "Today we're going to make a picture." Good, thought the little boy, and he waited for the teacher to tell him what to do. But the teacher didn't say anything. She just walked around the room. When she came to the little boy, she said, "Don't you want to make a picture?" "Yes," said the little boy. "What are we going to make?" "I don't know until you make it," said the teacher. "How shall I make it?" asked the little boy. "Why, any way you like," said the teacher. "Any color?" asked the boy. "Any color," said the teacher. "If everyone made the same picture and then used the same colors, how would I know who made what?" "I don't know," said the little boy. And he began to make a red flower with a green stem. Okay, and we do still have that poem up there if you, the poem, share a poem for your pocket if you'd like to add one. But we do have a closing reflection that we would love for you to participate in. Again, it's a Padlet. We always use these questions because they hit every level of learning. What did you learn? How has your thinking changed? And how will you use this information with your students?
Aaron, Darius has his hand raised. Would we be able to see what Darius has to
Sure.
say?
I
Awesome.
love
I
that.
don't know if Darius can unmute himself, so let me see.
Okay. Thanks
Try
for
it.
coming, Darius.
Yeah, try it, Darius, and then if you can, I'll try to find you and let you unmute. Hold on. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna lower your hand and try that. Hold on.
And while we are attempting to get this question, please feel free to use the QR code and answer the closing reflection questions. And even if you're watching this as a recording, we still get your Padlet responses. So we would love for you to interact with it.
All right.
There's so much to learn.
There he is. Okay, there we go, Darius. You can talk now.
I didn't even know you could raise your hand in this, so that's news to me.
I thought he could talk now. Let me see.
Oh, are you able to unmute him?
Yes.
Yeah, Stacy in the chat wrote a nice comment. "Too much guidance hinders students' creativity." Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, 2 resources, great. And we linked them, so you will get those resources.
Yes, I can. So sorry. There you are. There's the link for the final Padlet.
Oh, thank you, Sandra.
Yes, thank you for flagging.
Yes, I love What Works Clearinghouse too. It's interesting because Carly shared with me that her background is in psychology, and that was one of the first, I think you said that was one of the first websites that you,
Yeah.
yes, I love that. Faith encouraged students to develop their own understanding with more guidance than instruction. Oh, thank you, Glenna. Please feel free to continue adding, and we can turn over to Q&A if you want, Carly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop sharing. I don't know how Darius got there, but
Apologies, Darius. If you want to comment in the chat,
yeah,
we can read it out.
yeah, please do. I don't know. I'm gonna try to actually promote you to panelist first and see if that works.
Thank you. And again, I know it's a lot of information in a very short amount of time, and I'm a quick speaker, but you'll get these slides. And again, hopefully this just opened a door or a way for you to start thinking and exploring research on your own. Yes, thank you, Kalia. Oh, do you want to put up the next webinar? So as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the opening webinar to our series, Science plus Joy equals Impact. We have the full schedule right here. So up next, we're going to have a family-facing one that's family literacy practices for grades K through 2. So if you can invite your families to attend that, or you can attend yourself if you're an educator. Phonics will go into, again, focusing on the joyful practices of phonics and the joyful practices of read alouds and so on and so forth throughout this fall semester. Oh, let me give you the title. I'll actually type it in the chat. It's The Little Boy by Helen E. Buckley.
I see another hand, I think. Let me see. Trying to open it here.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. Something that we love more than anything is when we hear people who, they call themselves RIF kids. They received RIF when they were a kid, and then they went on to become a teacher or a librarian or something in children's literacy. Yes, so there is writing. It is going to be in April.
Yep, it's actually the last one of this series.